Okay, so I said last class we'd look at Homer's Odyssey together, and we'd be reading books 1 to 4. And I mentioned last time that the approach here is foundational in the sense we're going to look at the classics, and I do that without apology, although classics have been neglected in universities for several decades now. And one of the interesting things in our day is the return to classical education. There are schools that do it. Homeschooling materials are often called classical education. They tend to read the classics. Classics tend to be works that have stood the test of time, and they tend to, and you'll be able to tell me this afterwards whether it is actually true for you. They tend to be works that remain readable and interesting to people across different generations and cultures and times. There's something resistant to change, not the context of the stories, like the events depicted. Those seem in a mythological world as much as anything. But there's a universality about the classics in the sense that it seems to be speaking to a common human experience. And we can see that here in Homer's Odyssey insofar as it begins in a home of a man who has been away from his family for 20 years. And in the passage of time between when he left home and the events that begin the story take place, 20 years have passed, and his son has grown up without a father. And as we can imagine, the son is having trouble dealing with that. Furthermore, the wife having difficulty dealing with it. To add the complexity, the wife and son are surrounded by suitors of his wife's hand. They want to marry her. And the man, it turns out, is not just any man. He is the great hero Odysseus, who is the king of Ithaca. So we have a kingdom here without a king, a son without a father, a wife without a husband, a place that represents a little microcosm of the world, but without order, without its center. The center has been removed from the kingdom of Ithaca insofar as Odysseus, the king, would have held that all together. And where he is, nobody's quite sure. And it begins in that situation of doubt. That's where the story begins. Actually, no, that's where the plot begins. I need to distinguish between a plot and a story. A plot is the ordering of events that the storyteller decides to present to us. It's not necessarily the chronological order of events, let alone the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story, as we're going to see, let me put this out here for you. I have it on PowerPoint slides, which I can't get to work here, but I'll just put it on the whiteboard here and you'll get a sense of it. It begins at chapters 1 to 4 in the kingdom of Ithaca. Oh, that blue is sort of fading. I wonder if I got a better marker in my pocket. I'm quite sure that I do. Shall we try black? Let's see if black works. Pretty sure it does because I used it. Yes, it does. There we go. So books 1 to 4 are in Ithaca, which is a little kingdom on the west coast of Greece. I'll show you the map next time. And it will conclude books 14 to 24 in Ithaca as well. So it begins in Ithaca, and it will conclude in Ithaca. So those sort of bookend, as in the place where the events take place, they begin and end in the same place. In between, we're going to find, and 5 is a sort of a strange place, doesn't seem to even really fit, but books 6 through 8 and chapter 13 are in the land of the Phaeacians. Phaeacia, something like that. Phaeacia, there's probably an A in there. And in the middle of all that, books 9 through 12, we have the account of Odysseus's wanderings. So there is a sort of a structure in which there's a story. This is the story that Odysseus tells of where we begin, because we don't meet Odysseus till right here. For the first time, Odysseus comes into the story. We begin in Ithaca with the story of Telemachus and Penelope without Odysseus. When we come back to Ithaca, or Odysseus returns to Ithaca in books 14 to 24, then the father and son, or husband and wife, are going to be reunited. But at the beginning, they're separated. So we have Telemachus and Penelope without Odysseus. Where is Odysseus? Nobody knows. Well, in book 5, we'll be introduced to Odysseus. And then Odysseus is going to go from this place. I'll talk about this next time, not this time. And we'll find out how Odysseus gets from being in this place into a place where he can start to return home. And he lands on a place called Paideia. It's a land where he is entertained by demigods. Phaeacians are part human, part god, semi-divine. And he recounts to them his story. And the story that he tells is of his own wanderings. And his wanderings lead him from the time when he's in Troy all the way till the point where he's shipwrecked. And that's where we meet him here, Odysseus shipwrecked. On a desert island with a nymph. So Odysseus will tell the story of how he got from Troy in the Trojan War all the way to being shipwrecked, where we first encounter him here, and then he comes there. And then only after he's told his stories does he then get sent onward. So in the middle of the stories of the Odysseys of Odysseus are the centerpiece of the whole story of the Odyssey. It's the story that Odysseus tells about himself. It's embedded within Homer's larger tale. So the chronological beginning of the story is actually here, but the plot begins here. It's a frame around it. And so the structuring of the events isn't the chronological one. So it begins in the middle of the story, in the middle of the problem. And that's one of the features of an epic, actually. It's a lot like a crime drama, where you begin with, if you've seen them on television or whatever, you begin with a murder scene. You might even see the murder happen, but you begin with like a, CGI, CSI, whatever it is, not CGI, CSI, with a murder event. And then the detective comes in, and you eventually come to the story of how the murder happened. How did the murderer and the person murdered come into the situation where the crime scene happened? That's what's happening here. How did he get to be shipwrecked here and so forth? Well, we're given the backstory there. So it begins in the middle of things, in a point of suspense and a point of a problem. And the problem is that the grand hero Odysseus is not home. He is far away from his loved ones. And in order for him to have a fulfilled life and to be a complete hero, he needs to be reunited with his family. And they need him to have their lives complete. And he needs them. And he longs for them. We'll meet him next class when we look at him in book 5, and we'll see that he's weeping because he's far away from home and he can't get back. And he's been trying to get back for 20 years. So when we meet him shipwrecked, 20 years have passed since the fall of Troy, or 10 years rather, from the fall of Troy till this point. He's been trapped for a large number of years, that these years told about in here. So at the end of book 12, it is where we find him here. Now, let me say something about one further thing on this. The Odyssey is the second of two epics written by Homer, and the first of them is called the Iliad. The Iliad is the account of the Trojan War. Odysseus is one of the heroes of the Trojan War. He's not the main character in the Iliad. The main character's name is Achilles. And it's about the wrath of Achilles and Achilles' refusal to fight. What we know about the Trojan War, well, some of us know more than others. If you've seen the films and so forth, you know more than I did when I first read these events and so forth. We know that Achilles is killed. He's got an Achilles heel shot through the... That's not even told about in the Iliad, by the way. Achilles' death is not told in the Iliad. Neither is the fall of Troy told in the Iliad. You know, the Trojan horse and all that sort of stuff? The Trojan horse is Odysseus's ruse to get the Trojans to bring the Greeks in and destroy the city. That's not told in the Iliad either. So there are lots of events in and around the Trojan War which are not even told in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and yet we know about them. And that's because the story of Troy is so important that it's reflected on in all manner of sources. But the plot of the Iliad and the Odyssey is focusing on certain things of huge significance to the audience. And the way in which they're told is so significant that it's considered to be a classic. They wouldn't have used that word, but we will call it an epic. An epic is the genre of literature. And there are certain features of the epic which we're going to focus on. Maybe I'll recount them in exhaustive detail when I have my slide next time. But one of the things I certainly want to say, and not delay till then, is the fact that an epic is a long narrative poem that is written to be encyclopedic. Now, do you know what an encyclopedia is? But do you know what the breakdown of the word encyclopedia is? Perhaps not. I mean, you know what an encyclopedia is because you have Wikipedia even, which is a variation on an encyclopedia. An encyclopedia is a series of books, volumes possibly, of everything that is known about a subject, and it's intended for the education of children. So the word encyclopedia, it's encyclo... And this word here, Paideia, relates to children. Pediatrician, is a doctor for children. Pediatric needle, and here the encyclopedia is everything that a child needs to know in order to be knowledgeable. The epic is an encyclopedic genre. It teaches us everything about what a person needs to know to be a mature individual. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the way our modern encyclopedias work, where they tell you about events of human history. It will also teach us, among other things, about the gods and about what happens after death. So it'll talk about religious things. And so for that reason, it's a worldview text. It's a religious text. And Homer, the author of this encyclopedic epic, the Odyssey and the Iliad for that matter, was regarded as the teacher of all Greece. So they didn't have the Bible. This is probably written about 800 BC. The fall of Troy probably happened around 1200 BC. 400 years later, Homer writes the Odyssey. This is speculative, scholars speculating on it. And there are different versions of it, and a sort of a authorized version comes forward in the 6th century under a tyrant by the name of Pisistratus. But by the time it is written, Odysseus is almost a legendary figure. And his story, though, is not only about a man in the ancient past, a hero of an age hundreds of years in the past. Let's say the events of Troy are 1200. Homer writes in 800. It's being read and is being cited as a quasi-biblical book in the 4th century by Plato. Plato is going to critique the portrait that Homer presents of the gods. So it's been circulating for hundreds of years by the time Plato and Aristotle are citing Homer and reading Homer. Now, when they're reading it, they're actually not reading it. They're citing it from memory because it's been sung to them. So the context here for the Iliad, the Odyssey, is that there is a singer in the midst of a hall or grand assembly who will, from memory, recite the story of the Odyssey and the Iliad with musical accompaniment. And everyone will sit around and listen. It's their entertainment. There's more than entertainment, though. Education is happening here. Paideia is happening here. And this word paideia is also used, and I think I mentioned this last time, in Ephesians 6, verse 4. Fathers, educate your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. But paideia there is meant worldview, in the whole worldview of the Bible. So this is the very same sense that it will be used in Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 to 9. It's called the Shema. The Hebrew scholars call it the Shema. Jesus is asked what the greatest commandment is, and what does he say? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. Where does he get that from? The Shema. The greatest commandment is the commandment given to the people of Israel. And what does it say? Does anyone know? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. Shall talk of them when you sit down and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And when the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you with good and great and good cities that you did not build, etc., then take care lest you forget the Lord. So you teach them to remember the events of the past. And you're to present them, now these details as well here. It shall be on your heart. You'll teach them to your children. Paideia, context of education. You'll teach them to remember what God did in the past. The same God of yesterday, today, and forever. You're going to teach them those things and remind them of this. And you will talk of them when you sit down, when you walk, when you lie down, when you rise. In other words, all the time, not constantly, as if you talk about nothing else, but in every situation, you can talk about it. It comes up. You go to bed at night, you rise in the morning, when you're moving around, when you're sitting down, and you shall talk about them where? You shall bind them as a sign on your hand and between the frontlets between your eyes. Now, Jewish believers would actually have like a headband in the script of that. Torah is written there, and likewise on their hands. It represents your thoughts and it represents your deeds, your actions, what you do with your hands. So it should be reflected in all your thinking and all your actions. Furthermore, it'll be on the doorposts of your house. Oh, you can't even see this because of this stupid thing. Sorry. I forgot in my low-tech presentation to push away the whiteboard. It's on the doorposts of your house. In other words, it governs the domestic realm. It's also on the gates of the city. Oh, so it governs your politics and civic affairs. It's all over. So it's comprehensive. That's what we mean by paideia. So encyclopedic, it is a comprehensive type of education. It's not classroom education per se. It's a how to live. So in that sense, it's wisdom literature. It's a bit like the book of Proverbs. And I think, and I'll give you later on in the course some passages from Proverbs that you can compare to the Odyssey, and you'll see very much that it's about wisdom. This is wisdom literature. It is meant to be perennial. It's always going to hold to be true. It's talking about a universal situation, not that the situation of a father being away from his children and wife for 20 years is a universal situation, but the lessons to be learned are of universal significance. So it's not just ancient history, irrelevant. What do I care? The reason you care is because the purpose of the story is to acquaint you with human suffering and the wisdom that's needed to deal with it, because it is a poem about suffering, great suffering. It's called A Man of Sorrows, many sorrows. Sounds a bit like Jesus in that sense, right? Yes, so that's how it begins, and it's encyclopedic, and that's significant here, and it begins not with Odysseus, though, and that's the surprising thing. The Odyssey is about Odysseus, and it's about Odysseus's Odyssey. What do we associate with Odysseus and an Odyssey? Well, what do you associate with an Odyssey? What is an Odyssey? Give me a definition. Sure. Great long adventure. Any other associations? Yes. Any other features? Isn't it a long, hard journey? Isn't that like it has difficulties part of it? Yeah, I think so. So it's a long adventure, but it's a difficult one. You've had to overcome a lot of difficulties. No? Did you want to? Yep. Yeah, it has a moral element to it. So even today, when you talk about somebody, oh, that's a real Odyssey, it wasn't. It's a long story. Boy, that was a trial. You had real difficulties, and we get that sense entirely from this book and from this character of Odysseus. So he is a man of under extreme duress, and who has gone through a suffering like in secular literature, nothing like him. In biblical literature, we can find analogies, like in the book of Job. And suffering and wisdom literature often go hand in glove, very strongly associated. And there's something about, even Bible speaks a great deal about wisdom and suffering. 2 Corinthians, there's a lot of discussion about that as well, about how God uses what we call evil, that is suffering, for the purpose of good. And that's even evidenced here in Homer's Odyssey, an awareness of that fact. So Odysseus is a grand figure, and he's a figure associated with wisdom, furthermore. He almost represents wisdom. The goddess that looks after him is named Athena, and she is the goddess of wisdom. We'll meet her in right early on here in books 1 to 4. And she is going to present herself in the guise of an old man whose name is mentor. That word that Christians use all the time, and other people use all the time, about an older figure that puts an arm around you and gives you wise fatherly advice, that's a mentor. It's taken directly from the Odyssey. It's not a biblical word. It's not in the Bible. Mentor is not there. Mentoring, we talk about in Christian circles for good reason, but the figure of mentor is right from the Odyssey. Because, of course, it's a biblical concept, but it's just not a biblical term. And what's interesting is that Athena doesn't come as a woman. She comes as a man, like a father. And that's also saying something significant here. The young man, Telemachus, has grown up without a father, and he needs a father. He has a mother. The mother is necessary to him, but there's a different thing that a father brings to him, and the different thing that a father brings to him is lead by example. His mother can do all she can as a woman, but she can't replace the lost father. And once he appears, he, being her, Athena, in the guise of mentor, that wise old man will tell him what to do, and it starts to move him from the position where he is uncertain of how to act and lacking in self-confidence towards being a man that is more like his father and able to join his father in the cleansing of his own kingdom of the injustice and the unjust treatment of the suitors of his family. So that what you can see is character development. And character development takes place through the instrument of wisdom. So again, the whole thing I said is encyclopedic, but it's almost like wisdom is teaching us about how to live and how to act. It personified wisdom. And again, look at Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, where we have Lady Wisdom. There are two women in Proverbs 1-9. One is the adulterous woman that leads you astray, and then there's Lady Wisdom, and they're both crying out in the streets, calling for people to follow them. Make sure you follow the wise one and don't follow that one. So again, perennially significant human considerations. You don't need to be a Christian to appreciate it. But even as a Christian, you can. Maybe even more so, because Jesus Christ is the wisdom of God, personified. Anyway, so the hero of the first four books, though, then to our surprise, because Odysseus is not there, the hero is actually Telemachus. But he is very much of a flawed hero. He's sitting in the midst of all of these men who are trying to marry his mother, and he's upset about how they're behaving, but he's not capable of action. But he's 20, he's a full-grown man. All the more embarrassing. Capable of action, but doesn't act. So he's beating himself up about the fact that everyone says, oh, I look like my father. Well, you say that, I've never even seen him. But to hear that he's like Odysseus in appearance, but nothing like him in character, is like a rebuke. Makes him feel worse. And he can't fix his own problem. Doesn't know how to. Yes? He is a pale shadow of his father. And so this is the real problem. Now that's a great point. And the problem with that is that Odysseus is not only a wise man, he is a just man. He always honored the gods. He always did right by the gods. And yet look what's happened to him. That man can't come home. He's lost. Nobody knows where he is. He's in oblivion. Everyone's forgotten about the man. He's a mythical figure, a legendary figure, but he's not. The man never came back. It's a bad end to a story. And furthermore, his family is suffering. And who is going to believe that the gods are just if they allow that to happen? That's how the story begins. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, is going to come to her father, Zeus, and say, look at him. How can you let this happen? Did you have a question, comment? Yeah, I saw a hand. No? Please. Yep. It does. So the story begins with the fall of Troy and the beginning of his wanderings from there. So in book 9, that's actually the beginning of the story. But the plot begins obviously in book 1 with the problem of him being away for 10 years. Now, as I say, I think I interrupted myself on this. The Iliad is one of the stories. The Odyssey is another. The Iliad recounts 10 years. The Trojan War takes 10 years until Troy finally falls. That's a long war. And then it takes another 10 years for Odysseus to come back. In the interim, all the other heroes have returned home. He's the only one that has not come back. It doesn't mean the outcome for the heroes is all good, but everyone knows what's happened to them, but they don't know what's happened to Odysseus. And in the Greek understanding, this is a very grave injustice. And it's hardly a reward for being a good and just and wise man then, if you should meet such an ignoble outcome. As in, you're lost, you're weeping, and your wife is besieged by men who are unjust, and your son doesn't know how to act, and he's about to lose his life because the suitors will marry the mother and then kill the boy because he has claims to the throne. So it's a bad ending. It's this close. In other words, he'll be treated like a bad man would. He deserves that. Does Odysseus deserve that? No, it's unjust. So it begins with a problem, the apparent injustice of the good. Very sort of thing that you hear about in Proverbs and in the Psalms regularly. The righteous seem to suffer, the unrighteous seem to flourish. Happens all the time. It begins in book 1 with a invocation of the Muse. The reason it begins this way, this is characteristic of all epics, by the way, it will invoke a muse. Now the Muses, let me say something about the Muses. The Muses are the 9 daughters of a divine mother. The Muses are divine, the mother's divine. The mother of the Muses' name is, I hope I get the spelling right, Nemosune, memory. The 9 daughters of memory. Memory has 9 daughters, and each of the daughters is devoted to a particular art. There's one for epic poetry. There's one for history. There's one for tragedy. There's one for music, astronomy. There are different muses devoted to different arts, different ways of understanding the world. But there is one particular to epic poetry that is invoked here. And the reason why he has to appeal to this, that is Homer. By the way, Homer was reputed to be a blind man. So if you want to add the legend of the legend, the man who composes 2 grand epics that are so full of wisdom and so wonderful in plot construction and in language, he's reputed to be blind and recounts them and sings them. And sings them by memory. He's not reading from a page. And then his example is copied by later Homeric bards called rhapsodes, whose whole profession is to recount the story of Homer by song. So they're professional musicians, professional storytellers, and they don't make up their own stories. They just simply recount this story to song. It's a profession. You're going to be a rhapsode. I'm going to memorize all of Homer's story to song, play it, and do it in a way that is winsome and attractive to the audience. He appeals to the muse because he wants to remember something of such significance that it ought not to be forgotten. This is something our culture has almost wholly forgotten, the significance of memory, the importance of memory, the importance of memorizing. Technology is one of the main reasons for it, because we have immediate access to information, which in our laziness leads us to think that memory is something that is too hard and too insignificant to replicate. Why would I memorize something when I can just look it up and consult? And on a smartphone, I can consult all manner of things immediately. Why would I memorize it? What's the difference between memorizing something and just consulting for this? The difference is, one, you've internalized. It's become a part of you. You can call it up immediately, and parts of it will jump out to you. So if you've ever memorized scripture, the words come to your mind. In situations where you're under duress, and you're trying to think about what to do, the words come into your head. This is the word of God coming to you, that you honored so significantly that you memorized it and committed it to memory. And now memory is coming to your aid. I think much more memorization ought to be practiced by Christians. It's a muscle, by the way. The more you use it, the more you strengthen it, the better it is. So at first it's super hard. It gets easier and easier and easier. Memory is something that can develop. Obviously, if they can recount the entirety of this tale, it's possible. impossible for us, but if you actually worked at it as a regular passage, is it not possible to do this? And what would be the benefit? Anyway, he has memorized it and he's appealing to the muse. And another reason he's appealing to the muse is he needs divine help to tell a story of such significance that even the gods are interested in it. And that we're about to see that they are interested by the story itself will tell us that they're interested in it. So he begins with the great invocation of the muse. He calls upon the muse to speak through him. Divine inspiration. Tell me, muse, of the man of many ways, Odysseus, who was driven far journeys after he had sacked Troy's sacred citadel. Many were they whose cities he saw, whose minds he learned of, many the pains he suffered in his spirit on the wide sea, struggling for his own life and the homecoming of his companions. Even so he could not save his companions, hard though he strove to. They were destroyed by their own wild recklessness. Fools who devoured the oxen of Helios, the sun god, and he took away the day of their homecoming. From some point, here, goddess, daughter of Zeus, speak and begin our story. Now, the reference here to the episode of Helios, the sun god, takes place in book 12. That's when all of Odysseus' companions perish. Like, some of them die along the way here, but now all the rest of them are gone by 12. And he's the only one left. The only one. And he's shipwrecked, and he's got nothing. No treasure, nothing. When he ends up departing from that situation, he's going to lose every shred of clothing even. He comes back naked, just like a baby, into the land of the Phaeacians. This is a man who has no shred of adult dignity. The Greeks aren't afraid to run out naked, but you don't really, that's in the Olympic Games, like you're doing it for purpose. If you're wandering on without clothes, you're like a beggar. Bad state of affairs. That's how he returns from his Odyssey. It's a symbol of how bad things are. He's lost everything. He's rock bottom. So he appeals to the muse to tell the story and says, tell it from some point. He doesn't begin with the shipwreck. The muse chooses to begin with the story of his own homeland. So let's start with the picture, not of the man or of the king, but let's look at the kingdom. Look at what happened in the absence of the man. And then we'll go on to conclude there, but it's the big picture. This is not just a man, this is a king. And the king has a kingdom. And the kingdom is a place where the king's justice will be represented. In the absence of the king, there's no justice in his kingdom. So it's about a man, but the consequences of this man's life are huge. This is why killing a leader is different than killing just a man. You take the king out, you cripple the kingdom. Create a succession crisis, all sorts of chaos. It's effectively his kingdom has been decapitated. That's how it begins. Again, one of the conventions of the epic, it begins with the invocation of the muse, and secondly, it begins in the middle of things. As Horace, I'll give it to you next time, the convention. It begins right in the middle of events, and then it will backtrack and then go forward. Okay, so then the muse speaks. Then all the others, as many as fled sheer destructions, were at home now, having escaped the sea and the fighting. This one alone, longing for his wife and his homecoming, was detained by the queenly nymph Calypso. Book 5, Calypso, the nymph. Calypso, the word means I hide. A eucalyptus tree is a tree that hides, it gives good shade. The word EU in Greek is a particle that means good. It provides good shade. It's the same word that we get in Greek for apocalypse as well, by the way. The calypse means it's hidden. And apocalyptic is something that was hidden is now revealed. Odysseus is hidden. He's hidden away from everyone. His fame will not reach its intended purpose. He's dying like an animal, unknown, unremembered. But with Calypso, bright among goddesses, in her hollowed caverns, desiring that he should be her husband. But when in the circling of the years that very year came in, which the gods had spun for him his time of homecoming to Ithaca, note that, the gods had spun, reference here, oblique reference to the fates. The fates there are 3 fates, and they deal with a man's life. One begins by, it's like a thread. A life is the analogy is made to a thread. One pulls the thread, one measures the thread, and the third cuts the thread. And there's a time in a person's life when things happen and it's fated, and the fates can't be changed. It is so. There's no way of avoiding the fates. Even the gods, the Olympian gods, cannot change what's fated. And the time has come for him to come home. By the way, the word homecoming here in Greek is nostos, from which we get the word nostalgia. What do we call it in English? What do we call it? I guess it's just nostalgia. Greek word, 2 Greek words. Algia means pain, the pain of being away from home. I feel nostalgia, but we don't speak of it that way. We mean more, we're thinking about the past, the good old days. We feel nostalgic about it. There's a little bit of pain because it was so good, now it's not so good, and I'm far away from that situation. That's a different type of situation, but it's the pain of being away from home. Yes. Homesick is good. Yes, there's a more of an anglicized way of putting it. Homesick. This has the connotations of pain, though. In German, it's Heimweh. Never mind. That's accurate, more accurate. But you're right, homesick. Yeah. This is more than sick. It's painful. But she's been away so long, and the Calypso wants her to be her husband, and yet it's time for him. And not even then was he free of his trials, nor among his own people, but all the gods pitied him, except Poseidon. He remained relentlessly angry with godlike Odysseus until his return to his own country. But Poseidon was gone now to visit the far Ethiopians. Ethiopians, most distant of men, who live divided, some at the setting of Hyperion, some at his rising. So it's where the sun rises and the sun sets. In terms of our knowledge of geography now, it's in Africa, but Ethiopia is below where North Africa is. I mean, the Greeks, it's a long distant place, but it's the whole of Africa, I guess Central Africa, from the coast to the coast. That's called Ethiopia. Today we call Ethiopia East Africa. There's a place over there, like a country called Ethiopia. But here it's referring to a larger place. And Poseidon has gone there because the Ethiopians are worshiping him. Now, Poseidon is the god of earthquakes. He's the earth shaker, and he's angry at Odysseus. And he's preventing him from coming home. Why is he doing that? Go ahead. No, not killed. But yes, blinded his son. Yes. Now we're going to hear the story of that not until the middle of the book. Not only blinded him, he was foolish enough to tell the son of Poseidon his name and where he was from. Well, we'll get to that story. It's again itself a famous story. That story of the blinding of Poseidon's son, Polyphemus the Cyclops, and its significance. But that's why Poseidon's angry at him. And that story isn't told to us until the middle of the book, but the effects of it are known here. Well, why? Because this chronologically, in terms of the plot, it's the beginning of the story. In terms of the story, it's actually in the past. We just don't know about the story yet. But that's why. And we then get the Council of the Gods, another epic convention. So the Muse, and then the Council of the Gods. So we begin with the gods and how the gods are looking at the affairs of men and what do they think of it. And the reason that's significant is because even the gods are interested in the events that are taking place here on Earth. That's how important it is. And they're not only interested in it, they're troubled by it because injustice has happened. And the gods are concerned with injustice. These are the Olympian gods, by the way. I should say, I don't want to get sidetracked on this, but there are different deities in the Greco-Roman world. In the Greek account of the gods, there are battles between the sky gods and the earth gods, which the earth gods lose. They're called the Titans, and they're cast down into the underworld, the Titans. The Titans, the earth gods, represent chaos and disorder. The Olympian sky gods represent reason and order. The Olympians are worshipped by the Greeks, and they worship reason and order and justice, which goes with that. But here we see the representation of seemingly the Titans. We see a situation of chaos and disorder. How can this happen? If you, Zeus, represent justice and order, how can it be that a man who reveres you and is just and orderly in all of the things that he does is being blighted by chaos and disorder? Well, it's because his brother Poseidon has done it. But there's a problem. So there's a council of the gods, and they're receiving a hecatomb of bulls and rams, an offering. And the first among them to speak was the father of gods and mortals. Now he tells a story. What's the story he's going to tell? Okay, I have to spend a second on this. This is really seemingly inconsequential, but it's a strange thing, and it really, really, really bothers Zeus, the story he's going to tell. Oh, I get the chair as well. Just get rid of this. And he's going to tell a story, and he keeps going back to the story. Not he. Homer keeps going back to the story. And the story is of a few characters. And the character that he tells about has four main figures. One is Agamemnon. Agamemnon. The second is his wife, Clytemnestra. The third is her suitor, Aegisthus, Aegisthus. And the fourth is the son, Orestes. Now, the story of Agamemnon is that Agamemnon is the leader of the Greek expedition against Troy. He's the main figure. He's the political leader of all the Greeks as they go to war against Troy because his brother had been dishonored by Paris, right? But his brother Menelaus had his wife stolen away by Paris. And that incited the whole war. There's even a further backstory, which I could recount about that, which gives even further rise to that. Let me tell you the backstory. It's in book 23 of the Iliad. And it's what led to this whole mess. There was a wedding to which the gods and goddesses were invited. And one of them, however, was not invited. And the one who was not invited was named Eris, E-R-I-S, which in Greek means strife. You want to see symbolism? If you have a wedding, you don't want the guy you don't want to be there is the person who's renowned for causing conflict, right? It's a wedding. He's going to ruin it. Of course he is. Wherever Eris is, there's strife. He symbolizes strife. You don't invite Eris to your wedding. You want a happy, joyful time. Okay, so he's not invited, and he's really irked about that. And so what does he decide to do? He takes a golden apple, and he throws it in the midst of 3 goddesses. And on the apple, it says, "To the fairest." And then the 3 goddesses dispute which one of them should pick it up. Goddesses being vain. Yeah, I am. No, I am. No, I am. Now, the 3 goddesses are Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Hera represents good governance and order. She's the wife of Zeus. Athena represents wisdom. Aphrodite represents sex, love. I've got my slides. I'll show the next time the portrait of this. But the 3 gods, and they offer, so they're fighting amongst themselves and they can't resolve the quarrel. Who's the fairest? So strife is broken out. So they say, you know what? That guy over there, who's there? That's Paris. We'll get him to solve the problem. Which one of us is the fairest? Now, if you're Paris, you're going to lose no matter what you do here. You're going to win, but you're also going to lose. And they say, if you choose me, I'll give you what a reward in accordance with who I am. Juno offers him marriage, order, well, that sort of thing. Not Juno, Hera. In Roman, she's called Juno. Athena offers him wisdom. Would have been a good choice. Aphrodite offers him the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, being the bad character that he is, or the weak character, decides to go for the pretty girl. Unfortunately, the pretty girl happens to be married to Agamemnon's brother, and that ensues. The whole Trojan War ensues from a conflict amongst the gods. So the conflict amongst the gods leads to a conflict among the Greeks and the Trojans, which spills over and includes the whole of Greco-Roman history. I'll explain that. But this backstory, mythological conflict, causes the whole Trojan War and everything that ensues from this. Because from the fall of Troy, by the way, the people that leave there, the Trojans, they go on to found Rome. So it's a big background. It's just a little tale, but it lies behind the whole story here. Anyway, Agamemnon goes to avenge his brother. He comes back home. When he comes back home, he finds that so this is the Greek hero. This is the wife. This is the suitor. And this is the son. The hero comes home and he finds that his wife has had an adulterous affair with the suitor. And they resolve that they're going to murder him. And they do murder him. So he comes home and he is murdered by his wife and her lover, even though they're warned not to do this by the gods. They do it anyway. And Orestes, the son, kills them both. Now, the story of Agamemnon, Clytemnestra, Orestes is retold in the tragedies of the Greeks. Orestes, there's a play called Agamemnon. There's all these. So these events keep on being mined for stories of wisdom and teaching by other writers as well, not just the Homeric epic. So very important events. Now, the reason I tell you this is that Zeus brings this story to mind, but it's there as a foil for the story of the homecoming of Odysseus and his wife Penelope. And rather than Aegisthus, we have many suitors. And then we have a son here by the name of Telemachus. So this story is a foil for that story. Let me push this over here again. I read on. First among them to speak was the father of gods and mortals, for he was thinking in his heart of stately Aegisthus, with an OS, whom Orestes, Agamemnon's far-famed son, had murdered. Remembering him, he spoke now before the immortals. Oh, for shame, how the mortals put the blame upon us, gods, for they say evils come from us, but it is they, rather, who by their own recklessness win sorrow beyond what is given. As now lately, beyond was given, Aegisthus married the wife of Atreus' son, Agamemnon, and murdered him on his homecoming, though he knew it was sheer destruction, for we ourselves had told him, sending Hermes, the mighty watcher, Argefontes, same figure. Hermes is the slayer of Argos. Argefontes means Argos killer. Not to kill the man. We warned Aegisthus not to kill him, nor court his lady for marriage, for vengeance would come on him from Orestes, son of Atrides, whenever he came of age and longed for his own country. So Hermes told him, but for all his kind intention, he could not persuade the mind of Aegisthus, and now he's paid for everything. So this just pops into Zeus's head. The story of a man, a Trojan war hero, come home who's murdered, and the warnings and all that. The gods have told you not to do unjust things, and you do unjust things, and you're going to get what you deserve. That's the first thing that pops into his mind. It frames the whole story. This story is going to keep coming up in the Odyssey as background, as warning, and to some degree we're wondering what's going to happen to Odysseus. Well, the plan is to murder Odysseus if he were ever to come home. And Penelope, so there's parallelisms going to be there. And in dramatic terms, we often call this a foil. The one story is a foil for another. They're two parallels. Compare and contrast. Then in turn to Zeus, the goddess gray-eyed Athena answered him, Son of Kronos, our father, O lordliest of the mighty, Aegisthus indeed has been struck down in a death well merited. Let any other man who does thus perish as he did. But the heart in me is torn for the sake of wise Odysseus, unhappy man who still, far from his friends, is suffering griefs on the sea-washed island, the navel of all the waters, a wooded island, and there a goddess has made her dwelling place. She is daughter of malignant Atlas, who has discovered all the depths of the sea and himself sustains the towering columns which bracket earth and sky and hold them together. This is his daughter. She detains the grieving unhappy man, and ever with soft and flattering words she works to charm him to forget Ithaca, goddess of memory. They want him to forget. Don't forget. Remember. Remembering. Just like in the Shema. Memory of what happens. The wise lessons of the past need to be in your minds. Don't think they're just stories. Some stories are just stories. The classics are teaching you stories that need to be remembered because they contain wisdom, repositories of wisdom that will lead you to make good choices in your life. And not only does she seek to charm him to forget Ithaca, Odysseus, straining to get sight of the very smoke uprising from his own country, longs to die. That's how bad it is. But you, Olympia, now speaking to her father, the heart in you is heedless of him. Did not Odysseus do you grace by the ships of the Argives making sacrifice in wide Troy? Why, Zeus, are you now so harsh with him? Then in turn, Zeus, who gathers the clouds, made answer, My child, what sort of word escaped your teeth's barrier? How could I forget Odysseus the godlike, who is beyond all other men in mind, and who beyond others has given sacrifice to the gods? Note the character of him. He's beyond all other men in mind, just like Zeus, who's renowned for his reason and order and justice. He's a lot like the gods in this, the Olympian gods. How could I forget that man? Of all the men, I would not forget him. And beyond all others has given sacrifice to the gods who hold wide heaven. It is the earth encircler Poseidon, who ever relentless, that's his brother, by the way, but still, Whoever relentless nurses a grudge because of the Cyclops, whose eye he blinded. For Polyphemus, like a god, whose power is greatest over all the Cyclops. Theusa, a nymph, was his mother, and she was daughter of Phorcys, lord of the barren salt water. She in the hollows of the caves had lain with Poseidon. For his sake, Poseidon, shaker of the earth, although he does not kill Odysseus, yet drives him back from the land of his fathers. But come, let all of us who are here work out his homecoming and see to it that he returns. Poseidon shall put away his anger, for all alone and against the will of the other immortal gods united he can accomplish nothing. Then in turn the goddess gray-eyed Athena answered him. By the way, this phrase, gray-eyed Athena, the goddess gray-eyed Athena, you'll see this come up over it. She's always gray-eyed. It's an epithet. It's like an adjectival phrase that always describes Athena. It's partly to maintain the meter. The original meter would be dactylic hexameter. And I said that it's something that the poet sings, but it has a meter to it. It helps him memorize it and has a rhythm to it, just like hymns do. Like very orderly, metrical. It's easier to remember when they have meter to them. Contemporary worship lyrics don't have this. One of the reasons I don't like them. One of the reasons they're forgetful, or they're not memorable, rather. Because they're just all over the place. You're waiting for, and you don't even know where the song's going to go until you've heard it sung many times, because the singer's leading you, but you have to sit there until the singer sings it, because you can't join in right away. You don't know what the rhythm of it's going to be, because it goes up, it goes down, goes on a bridge, and goes into different directions. There's totally chaotic in its construction. Whereas a hymn has a fixed meter and an order to it, which is there for the purposes of memory. That's the purpose, because then you remember the words of the song, which are proclaiming theological truths about God, which you want to remember. It's worthy of memory. That's why you put it to meter. And you can add rhyme to it if you want. That gives a different character to it, but it aids memory. It's easier to remember when it has those features. So he'll put this away, and she says in response, Son of Cronos, our father, O lordliest of the mighty, if in truth this is pleasing to the blessed immortals, that Odysseus of the many designs shall return home, then let us dispatch Hermes, the guide, the slayer of Argos, to the island of Ogygia. So note that it's a sort of a funny thing. He says this, and now that you say it, Zeus, prove that you mean it immediately. No, but she doesn't trust her father. He's a bit of a politician. Zeus is presented almost like a political figure, a bit like Agamemnon. He says things to placate people around him, and if you don't hold him to it right then, he probably will do it at a time when it's more opportune for him, less politically embarrassing. He says, do it right now then. I'm glad you said that, I believe you, so send Hermes right away. And Hermes, the messenger of the gods, then goes on his behalf to announce this. And but I, that is Athena, shall make my way to Ithaca so that I may stir up his son a little and put some confidence in him. To summon into assembly the flowing-haired Achaeans and make a statement to all the suitors who now forever slaughter his crowding sheep and lumbering horn-curved cattle, and I will convey him into Sparta and to sandy Pylos to ask after his dear father's homecoming if he can hear something, and so that among many people he may win a good reputation. Aha. He's got a bad reputation. He's never left. Nobody knows who he is. He's got no renown under like his father. If you're a good man, other people will know about it. They'll speak of you. Have you heard of that guy before? You mean Odysseus' son? He doesn't even have a name. He's going to make a name for himself. Oh, Telemachus, son of godlike the name. To have a name is to have substance, standing in the world. People forget your name, you're not memorable. Everyone forgets everybody's names. But you don't forget celebrities' names. How come? You want to become like a celebrity. That's the aim of Greek life, is not to be, never mind the analogies there to our you want to be a name. People know who you are. You will be immortalized when people know your name. You will have done deeds worthy of renown and worthy of memory. First step is they don't forget your name. At the moment, he's just, oh, that's Odysseus' son. Odysseus' son. Oh yeah, Odysseus. I've heard of him. The other guy? Oh, okay. Well, he looks like Odysseus. Okay, but he's not his own man. So she goes there to make Telemachus more wise and more mature. She's going to mentor him. So off she goes, and disguised as, it says here Mentes, but that's just a variation on mentor. Disguised as a wise old man. So she comes to him. Lighted in the land of Ithaca, at the doors of Odysseus, at the threshold of the court, and in her hand was a bronze spear. She was disguised as a friend, leader of the Taphians, Mentes. There she found the haughty suitors. They, at the moment, in front of the doors, were amusing their spirits with draughts games, sitting about on skins of cattle, whom they had slaughtered. A cattle is a very valuable animal. Hugely expensive. To slaughter cattle to eat beef is depriving Odysseus' household of its wealth. So they're eating him out of house and home. That's what the suitors are doing. Hospitality is a big deal in the Homeric world. The etiquette of going from household to household and behaving properly, you're expected if a visitor comes to your home that you will be very hospitable. You will give them good food. You'll give them the best seat at the table. You'll treat them with honor. You'll wash their hands. You'll wash their feet. You'll show them all the respect. You'll ask them their story, how they got there. That's the rules of hospitality. But you don't outstay your welcome. You don't stay there infinitely. Because at the end of that, there'll be nothing left. Well, the suitors have been there for years. They never leave. Not only do they never leave, they eat his fattened calves. They will also sleep with his nursemaids. Like Scandal, the suitors are portrayed as very bad men. Just like Aegisthus is a bad man. You know, he's courting a man's wife while he's away. So that's what they're doing, and he's sitting in the midst. Now, far the first to see Athena was godlike Telemachus. So that's interesting. It says something about Telemachus. He sees a stranger come in the midst of the assembly, and what does he do? If he's a hospitable man, he will greet the stranger, not just pretend he didn't see him. Immediately beeline straight to him, and that's what he does. And his heart was deeply grieving within him, imagining in his mind his great father, how he might come back and all through the house might cause the suitors to scatter and hold his rightful place and be lord of his own possessions. With such thoughts, sitting among the suitors, he saw Athena and went straight to the forecourt as if she were his father. And he treats this man, Mentes, accordingly, as if he were his own father. That's hospitality. But you can see, like the way the story is told, he sees an old man he imagines as his dad, because in his heart he longs to see his father. It's a deep longing that can't be quenched. It's a deep grief. And this is one of the reasons the Odyssey is such a wonderful tale, is it really captures grief well in subtle ways. So it's experience universalized. The heart within him scandalized that a guest should still be standing at the doors. He stood beside her and took her by the right hand and relieved her of the bronze spear and spoke to her and addressed her in winged words. Welcome, stranger. You shall be entertained as a guest among us. Afterward, when you've tasted dinner, you shall tell us what your need is. So speaking, he led the way, and Pallas Athena followed him. Now, when the two of them were inside the lofty dwelling, he took the spear he carried and set it against a tall column in a rack of spears of polished wood, where indeed there were other spears of patient-hearted Odysseus standing in numbers. And he led her and seated her in a chair, with a cloth to sit on, the chair splendid and elaborate. For her feet there was a footstool. For himself, he drew a painted bench beside her. He gives her a better seat. Gives a footstool so that the legs are given rest. Will arrange for the washing and all that. He's treated with honor, this guest that's walked into the court, as if it were his own son, seated in his father's chair, as if he were the king. Come home, and it's not. But it is a representation of everything the king stands for, because we have personified wisdom in the guise of mentor here. And here's how the wise boy, could be bitter, and yet receives this well. And it's the path through which mentor will lead Telemachus to be the man that his father would wish him to be, and thereby show Odysseus honor. He will come home not to a boy who doesn't know how to behave, but to a young man whom he can be proud of. Right? So it's the beginning of the work of wisdom in the life of the household of Odysseus, and that's the beginning of the story. Now, that's how the Muse decides to tell it, because epics are told for the purposes of educating the young how to behave as adults. That's what it means to be educated, to know how to behave, know what to think and how to act as an adult, with respect, with justice, with hospitality, with all the graces that come from virtuous conduct. That's what she's trying to. And so she begins not with Odysseus, but with the child, with the son, just like in the Shema. You're teaching it. So education of the young, I have the privilege of being a university professor. I get to speak to young people, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to do. You can catch people right at the point in their life when they're away from home and having the infinite possibilities of life right in front of them. And you can set them in, like, this is a great epic to begin that sort of journey. Anyway, good text to do as well as your first text in university. But she comes in, the maidservant brings water, pours it into with a golden pitcher above a silver basin, polishes the table, brings bread, and they go on. And then Phemios comes. Now let me do this and let me just conclude with this. Phemios is a singer, and he plays a song and sings for the suitor because they made him. And we'll see that this song repeatedly comes forth and will tell the story of the Trojan War, among other things, as something that's happened 10 years ago, but is already a legendary action. But it's not just a legendary action, it's a very personal one, because of course Telemachus' own father was one of those heroes, and he hasn't come home. So it's going to hit him in a different way than everyone else. For others, Odysseus was this great figure. For him, that's my father, and I am nothing like him. So there's repeated ways in which we can see or imagine the grief and the turmoil within Telemachus and the transformation that will take place. So he's one of the heroes. The first 4 books are called the Telemachy by critics, because they're devoted to the education of Telemachus. I will conclude there. Next time I will pick it up. I'm going to move forward. I'll say a bit more about books 1 to 4, and then we'll move on to books 5 to 12. It's a lot. Yeah, I go as slowly as I can, but it's not slow. It is not slow. I understand that. But do read and read ahead, and I think you'll take great delight in it. If you're struggling to read it out loud. It's meant to be heard. And if you read it, you'll find it easier and more delightful. Okay? So I'll see you then. See you next time.